guys, Natasha Tessier here, owner of Dwell Realty and Design. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I wanted to go over Houston flooding and how to avoid it. I think if you've thought about moving here to Houston area and you have friends saying, oh my gosh, don't move there, there's tons of flooding, which is not really true, but I will get into the details. I have my notes. Or if you just, heard all the footage of Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and there is a lot of footage and a lot of flooding there, then you might be a little bit nervous about moving here. And so I just wanted to go over today, put you at ease. I've never sold a flooded house, but today let's dive into how to avoid Houston flooding. Hi there, I'm Natasha Tessier. Welcome to my channel. If you need to know anything and everything about the city of Houston, please hit the subscribe button. You can click on the little bell and it'll alarm you when I do a new video. I try to post them every Friday, and I've been doing a lot more shorts. Like I just did a video tour this morning that I got for a client looking at a house in Montgomery, a block from the lake. It was only $220, I believe, for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, really cute starter home. Anyway, if you need any information, please hit the subscribe, text me, call me, whatever. My number is below, and you can fill out one of our forms and we'd love to help you. So let's dive in today to how to avoid flooding in Houston. So everybody has heard of Hurricane Harvey. It happened in August of 2017. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. It was horrible. They called it an 800-year flood. I think 200,000 homes flooded, and it was awful. So the good thing is now we kind of have a marker for, that was the worst storm recorded in history. So we kind of have a marker off to what to go on, and I'll talk through all the changes that have happened since Harvey to prevent future flooding. Like I said in my intro, I've never sold a flooded home. So I think that people get, especially out here in the suburbs, Katy, Sugarland, Magnolia, Montgomery, Tomball, the Woodlands, Conroe, those areas were not as impacted. There are parts of them that were, but for the most part, they were not impacted like the city of Houston. So of all the homes that I've sold, I haven't sold a flooded home. So we get calls and texts every single day, people asking, can you give me more information on this home? Can you go get a video of this home for me? All I do is help people from out of town trying to move into the city. So the first thing I do with flooding is on our MLS, it will not allow us to hit a search only for homes that have not flooded. But we do have flood maps and we do have seller's disclosure. So the first thing you want to do is reach out to me or an agent and say, what is the deal? We can send you the seller's disclosure. On the seller's disclosure, they have to disclose any flooding, any and all flooding. And then we can also send you the flood map, and it'll tell you whether it's in the 500-year floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, or most likely not in a floodplain. And during Harvey, some not in the floodplain did flood, and I will go into detail as to why that happened. So if you're looking on a map, you've got Galveston Island, okay? And that's a 26-mile long barrier reef island. More than 6 million people visit that island every year. They've cleaned it up. It's beautiful down there. Now, the beaches are not amazing, in my opinion. I like to go further south, but it is a great spot to visit. And, all of Galveston has been picked up, cleaned up, and a beautiful place to visit. But obviously hurricanes are a threat there. It's right on the water. So people who are looking in Clear Lake, Pearland, Friendswood, all down in that area, yes, you're gonna be more prone to having issues because I'm probably an hour and 15 minutes, I don't know, I'd have to time it, from Galveston. But the time the storm hits, and dissipates, we may get some rain, but we're very rarely impacted, like I said, out in the suburbs of Katy, Woodlands, all those areas. So, however, with Harvey, what happened was the storm hit and then it stayed here for like 7 days, just constant raining. We had over 40 inches of rain, and they had the levees and the lakes too full already. And so it was too late to let that water out. And when they did let it out, it already flooded some of the homes. So Harvey has become kind of a reference point for us. As I said before, it's the 880-year flood. So there's an extremely low chance that anything like that happens again in your or my lifetime. It was kind of a freak thing. The rain stayed here forever. I swear it just kept raining and raining and raining. A good example, my parents, I was born in the house that my parents lived in at the time. Never once did it flood. We would have Hurricane Alicia growing up, Hurricane Ike, all these storms, and the streets would flood, but water never ever came near our house. But my parents lost their house. We lost 5 family cars in Harvey. It was crazy. So that's why they're saying it's kind of a freak thing, I'm not gonna tell you my age, but I guess you could probably guess, but of all the years that I've lived here, and my parents, my mom's in her 70s, never ever has, that ever happened. So the chances of it happening again are very slim, but it does give us kind of a marker to go on. So the San Jacinto River comes in, if you're looking at a map, and that feeds Lake Conroe and then on down to Lake Houston. And one thing they've done now to prevent future flooding is towards the end of the season, like August, hurricane season is, I believe, like end of July, they will lower the lakes. And so they'll lower it just a couple feet so people can still boat because it's still really hot and we all love to go out and play in the lakes, but they'll lower it a little bit to prepare for hurricane season, which is like through the end of October. So that's one change that we've made. When Harvey hit, all those were already full. There's a lot of speculation or why they didn't lower those before the storm hit, but they did not. And so everything was too full. The levees were going to break. They had to let them out. And that's what caused a lot of our flooding. So during Hurricane Harvey, there was, $125 billion worth of damage in the city of Houston. Like I mentioned earlier, over 200,000 homes flooded, and many of those were not in the floodplain, which is crazy. I mean, that doesn't usually happen. If you're in the 100-year or 500-year, the reason is your house is low lying. So the chances are that more likely that you're going to flood. So if you're in the 100-year floodplain, I think it means that there's like a 1 in 10 chance that home will flood every year. With that being said, with that much damage and that much flooding house, I still have not sold a flooded home. So that's really important to think about. Like, we get this really bad rap, but there's majority of the homes did not flood. So even with that huge event, they did not flood. So the other thing, like I said, you can look at the seller's disclosure, reach out to me anytime, send me a picture and say, hey, Natasha, we like this house. Can you tell us the flooding information? I can show you the flood map. I can tell you whether it's ever flooded in the seller's disclosure, all that good stuff. The reason I haven't sold many flooded houses is, like I said, majority were not impacted. But for those that were, so let's just say my parents' house, they lived there for 45 years before they ever had water in the home. A home like that, the chance of that flooding again is still pretty slim, but it happened. So never say never, but if your home didn't flood during Harvey, I feel like it's going to be pretty hard pressed to flood just because that was such an anomaly. Okay, the other thing that the city is doing to help prevent, so we're lowering the lakes towards the end of the season. The other thing we're doing, this Harris County and Montgomery County, they have new requirements on retention. So as I understand it, before Harvey, people were laying concrete, they were building neighborhoods, they were building churches and office buildings, and there was no retention pond. So as you take up that space with concrete, the water has nowhere to flow out. So now, and I don't know the exact requirements, it's something like for every square foot of concrete that somebody lays, you have to have a cubic foot of retention pond. Again, don't quote me on those numbers, but you have to have a certain amount of retention on your actual property. So now you'll see a church going in and they'll have their own pond on their property so that if it floods, that concrete that they laid there, it has a place to hold that water before flowing into the city. So that is another thing. They're lowering the lakes and then they're creating retention ponds and a lot of restrictions on building now to hopefully prevent anything in the future that massive from occurring. Let's talk about flood insurance. So if you're in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain and you have a lender involved, they will require flood insurance. That's usually going to be around $600 to $1,200 a year. It just kind of depends on the size of the house and all that stuff. It's obviously gone up in price. However, if you are not in a floodplain, you are not required to carry flood insurance. I do not live in a floodplain and I've never carried flood insurance because I've lived through Harvey and I know what the streets look like in my neighborhood when it floods. But a lot of people carry it just as a backup. If you don't live in the floodplain, then it's even more affordable because the chances of it happening are pretty slim. And then the other thing to think about during Harvey is some of those houses, and these are the ones, again, I haven't sold a flooded house, but I know a lot of people buying them is that because they're getting a better deal because it's a flooded house. But some of them only got like an inch to 2 inches of rain during Harvey. And a lot of that was, big trucks driving on the streets or sometimes even boats and making waves, and then it would go through the weep holes. So it wasn't like foot, 2 and 3 feet of water. It was barely dripping into the house. So they just replaced their sheetrock, insulation, flooring, and, went at it again. So that was a lot of the homes. And then some of them, like my parents was underwater for a really long time. They ended up tearing it down and just starting over. Okay, let's talk about new construction when it comes to flooding. Now, most developers are not building in any floodplains at all. They don't want the neighborhood to flood. That is literally a lawsuit waiting to happen. So let's just say you're looking at a house and it was built after 2017. Well, will that flood? That's harder because we don't have that marker. However, almost every developer is taking huge strides to prevent that. So what I mean by that is they will build 2 and 3 and sometimes even 5 feet above the street. So all that water is going to go into the street and drain there. But then they're even building all their pads up way higher than that so that you don't have any issues. During Harvey, I was living in a neighborhood called Wood Trace, and it was amazing. Like, it was a newer neighborhood. The water flowed. Nobody even had water on their lawns during all of Harvey. So the newer neighborhoods are being really, really diligent to make sure that the drainage is right and the flood, the house is built up way higher than the street so that you don't have to worry about that. I did, though, just sell a house and the buyers were fine with it. It is new construction in a very popular master plan community. They informed us when we were signing the contract at the very end, oh, by the way, we just got zoned to the flood zone. And my buyers were confused. Now, here's why that's happening. Every year, the different counties that you're in look at the flood map and say, okay, does that fall? And they change the level based on the flooding. So you're gonna sign a document when you buy saying, if your house ever becomes in the flood zone, you're required to have flood insurance. Every single person that buys has to sign that through the lender. So there's a chance that you aren't in a flood zone and could become in one. And that is what has happened to this neighborhood because of the way the drainage is and the things flow, that they're going to be required to carry flood insurance on their new house. Now, I sell new homes every single day. That is the first time I've ever heard of a new neighborhood having that. So that is very, very rare, but there is one neighborhood now that they are requiring flood insurance on. So that's about the main things that they're doing to avoid flooding. So first thing you want to do is reach out to me. Let me tell you whether it's in a flood zone, if it's on the seller's disclosure, whether that home has ever flooded. That's step 1. Step 2 is that they're letting out the lakes and letting the water down so that we have more room for more water and more retention. And then part 3 is that they are definitely requiring retention ponds and different things for different building codes and all that stuff. So there's a lot going on in the city to prevent that. And like I said, there's only a few major hurricanes that I even remember impacting, but out here in the suburbs, when you're an hour away, it's really not that big of a deal. As long as you're not in a flood zone. There are a few neighborhoods I do want you to be aware of out in Conroe and different areas that flood multiple times. So, if it's flooding during Harvey and they call it the tax day flood, and if it's flooded 3 or 4 times, it's gonna flood again. So I personally wouldn't want that stress in my life. You can buy a flooded house, it's no big deal, but it does create, to me, a lot of angst. And, people do it all the time. A lot of investors do it. They carry the flood insurance, they redo the house, on the insurance. But if it were my forever home, I wouldn't want the stress and the worry of, being in that house that's flooded over and over. So I hope this video was helpful. If you ever have questions, reach out to me anytime. If you're looking to move next week, next month, in a year, you're just not sure, you want to know more about the area, I'd love to chat with you and help you out. And I hope this video was helpful on flooding. Please comment below and let me know what you thought of it. And I hope you have a blessed day.